Good morning. Welcome to the premium and public video discussion for Wednesday, November 23rd, 2016. Of course, I'll be out of the office on Thanksgiving, so I want to say an early happy Thanksgiving to all my followers, both premium and public. Thank you for letting me live my dream. I really appreciate it. And of course, with this being a combination video, I'm going to give everyone a special treat, and we're going to dive into not only what's going to transpire over the next 24 hours with the threat for some rain and snow, but also look at the winter forecast so far and where I think we're headed and what I'm seeing and why I am rather confident in not only the winter forecast, but I'm going to be busy, I think, in December and January and February. So much so, it's better stock up the coffee and get ready for a very interesting couple of weeks on the way. Next, probably 12 to 16 weeks are going to be very, very interesting for this meteorologist. So let's see how this all plays out. Now, first of all, the observations this morning are in the upper 20s to lower 30s over the northern interior and mid to upper 30s in the urban areas and along the coast. Notice those dew points. This has me a little concerned. They're in the upper teens to lower 20s, and this is going to be a very important observation as we head to tonight on through tomorrow morning, especially if you're traveling for Thanksgiving. When we take a look at the radar, high and dry right now over our neck of the woods, but we clearly have an area low pressure is on the way with some moisture transport, some light to moderate rainfall over the Ohio River Valley, building into the upper Midwest where we have some heavier rainfall. Also notice we do have some frozen precipitation here in the Ohio River Valley as well. So we have an area low pressure is on the way. And this area low pressure has the potential, of course, to produce some frozen precipitation for the region tomorrow. Now, the primary focus is for the northern interior, northeastern Pennsylvania, northern New Jersey, Hudson River Valley, interior Connecticut. But even for locations like central New Jersey, I'm a little bit concerned about slick roadways for tomorrow morning. And let me set this up for you. On the water vapor satellite picture, take a look at this. Now, when you're forecasting for meteorology, okay, when you're forecasting for the weather, it's not always the most obvious detail. Sometimes it's the small detail, the one that you kind of miss. And what I am noticing is this area right here. It's called convergence and confluence. Now, what's happening is that this upper level low is leaving, this storm is approaching. It's a rather sheared low pressure system and upper level trough. This is not a very strong storm. You have some pretty healthy thunderstorms down here in the Mississippi River Valley and towards the Gulf Coast. But for the most part, this is a sheared upper level shortwave at 500 millibars, and it's transporting some moisture, but it's not very strong moisture transport. But what's key to me is this area of convergence and confluence aloft at the upper levels of the atmosphere, because that leads to high pressure remaining strong. High pressure is exiting, the whole pattern overall is progressive, it's all moving to the east, but the fact that the high pressure system is strong, you have sinking air, means you have dry air. And notice what I said about the dew points. Watch them very carefully. So when we take a look at the model guidance, one thing I'm noticing, first we're going to use the European model guidance. Now again, you use a tool for the right job. When it comes to dealing with something called PVA, positive vorticity advection, you use more of a global model, okay? And then when you want to look at temperature boundary layers, then you use the mesoscale model, like the NAM, for example. So you use the right tool for the job. In this case, we're going to look at the European guidance to take a look at the 500 millibar pattern and look at the PVA. So that's this yellow and orange here, okay? So this upper level low is exiting, this trough, which is sheared, is approaching, and keep an eye on this ridge right here. So what happens over today into this evening is that ridge moves right over us. Tranquil weather conditions for now. But it also leads to high pressure building south. So by the time we get to tomorrow morning, yeah, the ridge is exiting. This is severely sheared. This is a rather disorganized low pressure system. So we're not looking at heavy precipitation here. But because we have this factor right here with high pressure, let's say probably around Maine starting to exit out, is going to lead to the potential for a colder, low-level environment. So when we take a look at the atmosphere, now we're going to go to the NAM model, guys, to take a look at the localized atmosphere as far as all the boundary layer considerations. This leads me to be a bit concerned about the threat for freezing drizzle, for example, a few snowflakes here and there. At 850 millibars on the NAM, let's be very clear, this is very warm. Okay, so I'm not really seeing this as much as of a snow threat here, even for the interior, even for a dusting to an inch. Yeah, there will be some snowflakes mixed in, but I'm more concerned about the threat for some sleet and some freezing rain here in this environment, because 850 millibars is very warm. It is not supportive for snowfall, and this is during the time period from this evening on through tomorrow morning. So clearly, until that low pressure system starts to exit and pulls in cold air, we don't really see any support for cold air at the 850 millibar level. 925 millibars is the same thing, a little bit colder, okay? So it will support some frozen precipitation, perhaps graupel, sleet, and of course the threat for some freezing rain. But here is where I'm concerned at the lower level. And this is where this type of model really is useful, because it does a very good job in understanding the boundary layers. Okay, that's the lowest part of the atmosphere where you and I live. And what I'm noticing here tonight into tomorrow is that these temperatures range anywhere from, let's say, about 29 to 35 degrees heading into tomorrow morning from about northern New Jersey, possibly pushing to central New Jersey and southern New Jersey into Pine Barrens, eastern Pennsylvania, and of course you got northeastern Pennsylvania and the northern suburbs to the north of New York. Where it's well above freezing is basically right along the coast and in your urban areas. So what I'm concerned about here, and again, this is not a widespread heavy precipitation threat, but it's light showers and drizzle. So let's say you have a temperature around 35 degrees, a dew point, say around, at this point, 28. You get some of this light precipitation on some untreated roadways. Boom, you get slick roadways at 8 a.m. in the morning on Thanksgiving morning. So if you're traveling, use some caution, because temperature might say 35 and you might say, hey, it's above freezing, but at the roadways, with some of that dry air still mixing in there, could cool off just enough to produce some slick spots. So use some caution. The good news is that as we head towards the later portion of the hour, even by mid-morning, we see a significant warming in the atmosphere, and we will be above freezing by 11 a.m. for the entire region. So if you're heading out in the afternoon, there'll be a few showers, but won't be all that horrible. When we take a look at the guidance a little bit further with the precipitation, again, this is not a widespread heavy precipitation. If you're going to the Macy's Day Parade, don't worry about it. You might want to bring, I wouldn't say an umbrella, but the crowds, but a little bit of rain gear. You could deal with a few passing showers as Santa Claus comes down in New York City. But for the most part, it's going to be more of a nuisance showers, not anything of widespread heavy rainfall, just these passing showers moving through. And that's going to continue all the way on through Thanksgiving and into Friday with the threat for these passing showers, as we have a series of low pressures moving through the area. Talking about the long-range pattern, it's going to get interesting. When we take a look at the sea surface temperatures, a lot has changed over the past couple of weeks since we last all chatted. Notice the North Pacific. Well, we have definitely transferred over to a clear positive PDO. This is textbook here. And this is really important because right now the Pacific jet stream has been producing what we call basically a fire hose from Asia all the way into North America, flooding North America with Pacific air and keeping it rather warm. But we've been noticing some changes. The Arctic air that was in Siberia has dislodged, and that strong ridge is starting to shift out of Siberia, and that's allowing the pattern to change, and it's starting to allow the Pacific pattern to change. And when you start getting this signature, it produces more of an El Nino-like pattern, which basically allows a trough to dig in the east and better potential for high latitude blocking. It's not a kingmaker. In other words, it's not driving the pattern, but it's certainly a signal of a pattern change on the way. Meanwhile, our La Nina is, well, almost La Nada. It's very, very weak, very weak. In fact, the latest analysis that came out is almost neutral. It is neutral in some cases. So this is a very weak signal. Okay, so the primary driver in this weather pattern, as I've been saying, is the stratosphere. Now, when we take a look at the convection going on here, one thing I'm noticing is that the MJO is certainly moving into some more favorable phases. First of all, we no longer have that string of powerful storms basically bombarding the western United States. Now we're seeing more troughs and ridges. We're seeing these storms lift further north. So we're starting to see changes in the Pacific pattern itself, but I'm noticing we're also seeing a little bit more convection developing around the date line from 160 east to 160 west. Now remember, this is a La Nina-like pattern, so you're not going to see a lot of convection around the tropical Pacific. It's not an El Nino pattern where you'd see very rambunctious and very energetic convection developing in this area. But the fact that we no longer see a huge concentration in Indonesia, it's a little bit, but it's not dominant, means that we are starting to see the tropical forcing features starting to shift and change. So this is another factor, but take a look at the stratosphere. I wanted to show you, this is really important to accentuate why this winter is going to be a lot different from last one. It already is. I mean, we're seeing near normal temperatures, which seem like it's cold in November, because last year we were in the 60s and 70s for Thanksgiving and for Christmas. So it feels like winter. This is the stratosphere now. It is well above normal. This is the stratosphere last year, basically falling into a free fall well below normal. The reason why I'm pointing this out is that we're dealing with clearly a completely different stratospheric nature, and it's a much warmer stratosphere, which means more high latitude blocking, weaker polar vortex. I know we've been through all this, but I wanted this really illustrates the difference between last year and this year. You could point to a various number of reasons, from weak solar output to changes in the QBO and changes in the way that the flux in the atmosphere, the transfer of heat from the troposphere to the stratosphere, all having these factors. Certainly it's a much stronger transfer of heat from the stratosphere to the troposphere this year than what we saw last year. So these factors are all playing into a much different dynamic in the atmosphere. And what I'm noticing, what I wanted to show you on the GFS analysis, and make sure I show this correctly, here we are right now. And what we've been seeing for much of this fall is the strongest and the warmest stratospheric warming, basically in Asia and in the North Pacific, basically leading to a very deep trough in the polar vortex locked in over Siberia, a strong Pacific jet stream, and us remaining mild. Look what's happening to the stratospheric warming now in the model guides. As we move forward, we're going to fast forward to 10 days out. Now again, there's always you don't never take anything verbatim 10 days out, but you certainly can take note of the trends. And the trends clearly are showing a shift towards North America. This might be a little fast, but the point is, and I'm seeing this in other guides too, is that we're starting to clearly see a shift in the stratospheric warming that was focused in Asia and Siberia that led to incredibly cold anomalies in Siberia, and also strong high latitude blocking in the Arctic, which also led to a warm Arctic, which I'm sure you heard, is now shifting towards North America. And this is a fundamental key change that must happen in order for the winter forecast to verify. So we're starting to see this starting to evolve. Again, I wouldn't take this as far as detailed analysis. Just look at the trends that are happening. And this might be a little fast in the evolution, but I like the trends of where this is all going because it's supported by all the other observations. So we see that, and then we see angular momentum. This is really key too. I'll keep this simple. High angular momentum, which is basically this side, is more of an El Nino-like state. This is more of a La Nina-like state. You like to kind of match up the patterns, okay? And what you want to see is that in this state, you see more of a ridging effect in the Pacific. rather than this state where you see more of that strong Pacific jet stream. So this leads to a weakening Pacific jet stream. And what we've gone to is one that was strongly positive. Now we're neutral, and then we trend towards negative. With this evolution happening, when we go to a negative phase, we see that the Pacific jet stream really starts to weaken and starts to produce more troughs and ridges, becomes more amplified. And so as a result, I think that's when we see the trigger to the Arctic air coming from Siberia to North America and then down into the United States. So what we're looking for and what we've been seeing in the trends is for this starting to set in place. I said a couple weeks ago to premium members that I thought the GFS was a little too fast in this evolution, but the idea is right. Just the speed is wrong. It's too fast. And it looks like that's evolving as expected. So when we take a look at the model guidance, this is the European guidance, and you can see that the culmination of that polar vortex that was sitting here is now shifting back more towards the North Pole as it's starting to reorganize. We're seeing more of a wave pattern here. This is a clear sign here of a pattern change that is about to take shape when you start to see these waves start to rotate through and starting to see these changes. So the next question is, what's happening with the temperatures? And you see with the European guidance, you're seeing that slow press down, kind of like molasses. Again, I always advertise this is going to be a slow step down process with storms lifting north, and you get this cold shot and a little bit of moderation and another colder shot. And that's exactly what we're seeing here as Canada becomes colder and colder and rebuilds that snow, rebuilds that cold environment. And then we continue to see the press down. Now watch what happens once this dislodges. Look for it to head towards the northern plains first, and then build and then moderate as it pushes east, because it has to. We have to get this area cold and snow-packed. That builds the insulation, so that way when colder air masses, as we move on through the winter, move to the east, they don't moderate as quickly. So the process is certainly in place. And what has really stood out to me when we took a look at the GFS guidance is the polar vortex at 10 millibars. That's where we need to see this start to happen first and then translate down towards the low portions of the atmosphere. As the stratospheric warming is getting stronger and lifts northward, or I should say higher up in the atmosphere, look at the direction of the polar vortex. It's been sitting here, then it went here, now it's shifted up towards northern Eurasia, and then towards the end of this analysis, and again, don't take this as verbatim, but look at the trends and look at what everything else is happening in the atmosphere. And you see that this support for this polar vortex to eventually shift towards North America, like that, well, it makes sense from everything else that we're looking at. So the process is certainly taking shape. It's evolving as expected. And I think that a lot of people are going to be very happy if they love snow. If not, well, I don't know. There's always a nice warm fire and maybe a plow service to get your driveway cleared. I think you're going to need that this winter. That is your video discussion for today. Have a happy Thanksgiving. I hope you enjoy it. I hope everything is great. And as always, stay safe out there.